Should pastors endorse political candidates from the pulpit? That's the question everyone's asking after the IRS just said churches won't be penalized anymore for naming names in sermons. But maybe that's not the real issue. Maybe the deeper question is this: did the church trade its voice for a tax break?
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
In 1954, Senator Lyndon B. Johnson added a quiet amendment to the tax code that banned nonprofit organizations, including churches, from endorsing political candidates. The reason? He wanted to silence his political critics, and the church got swept in. Over time, this led to fear, not just of taxes, but of being seen as too political. So many pastors pulled back. The law didn't silence the church silenced itself. Fast forward to today. The IRS, under a Trump-era policy and recent court settlement, now says pastors can speak freely from the pulpit, even endorsing candidates without risking their tax-exempt status. President Trump has called for the abolishment of the Johnson Amendment. But this wasn't a new law, it was a policy shift, and like all policies, it can be reversed with the next administration. But let's zoom out for a second here. This isn't just about the IRS paperwork. It's part of something bigger. In 2017, during the National Prayer Breakfast, President Trump said,
"It was the great Thomas Jefferson who said, 'The God who gave us life gave us liberty.' Jefferson asked, 'Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God?' Among those freedoms is the right to worship according to our own beliefs. That is why I will get rid of and totally destroy the Johnson Amendment and allow our representatives of faith to speak freely and without fear of retribution. I will do that, remember."
Now, in 2025, with this updated IRS guidance, Trump is making good on his promise to reopen the public square to direct Christian influence and to reverse the chilling effect of LBJ's amendment, which for decades kept the church's light hidden under a bushel. Let me ask two questions in humility. Have we traded our prophetic voice for cultural comfort? Did we hide our light under a bushel? You see, this isn't just about policy, it's a spiritual surrender. And as Dallas Willard warned, the greatest danger to the Christian church today is that of pitching its message too low. We've lowered our voice and softened our truth and lost our influence. After all, the Bible is spiritual and political in nature. Because think about it, God created government. In Deuteronomy 6, it shows us how God used Israel not just as a religious group, but as a nation with laws, judges, and civic leaders to reflect his character. He didn't stop using government after the resurrection. Jesus revealed a kingdom that transcends the nation, but is still meant to influence them. We aren't called to be passive, we're called to be present. Romans 13 reminds us God appoints leaders to promote good government. And in Proverbs 29, it says, "When the righteous rule, the people rejoice." God's people were never called to silence in the face of political power. They were called to boldness, truth, and justice, even when it cost them everything. From Elijah confronting Ahab, to Moses standing before Pharaoh, to John the Baptist calling out Herod's sin. Jesus called Herod Antipas a fox, which is a deeply political insult. And when Jesus declared to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world," he redefined kingship, transforming earthly power structures by working through them while establishing a divine kingdom rooted in sacrificial service and spiritual authority, transcending the coercive hierarchies of Rome. Jesus changed the course of history through human political structures. And that brings us to the foundations of the American Revolution. The United States was not founded as a theocracy, but it was built on Christian principles, truth, justice, liberty, and accountability under God. The Declaration of Independence states it plainly: all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. It's the ultimate experiment in self governance, where the citizens are the kings and queens of the nation. Our government derives its power, its just power, from the consent of the governed, meaning the heart of the people. Now stop and think about how profound this is. God has always been most concerned with the human heart. And America's founders created a system that depends entirely on the character and virtue of its citizens. Without the transforming power of Jesus Christ working through Christians as salt and light, self-governance becomes self-destruction. A free and virtuous society can only survive when it's grounded in the one who gives us those rights, the God of the Bible.
It sound right, boys.
So now that the door is open again, will the church speak? Are we more afraid of losing our nonprofit status than losing the culture? Are we okay watching chaos unfold while we whisper, Jesus loves you, behind stained glass? And think about it this way. If Jesus didn't want Christians involved in culture or politics, he would have prayed, Father, I ask that you take them out of the world so they don't have to be of the world. But he didn't. In John 17, he prayed the opposite. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. Jesus didn't die to build a polite, hidden church. He called us to be salt and light, to confront darkness with truth. In my view, that means we are called to be the conscience of our society. We should remind elected officials of their obligation to honor the principles of the Creator, the very one invoked as the source of inalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence. But how should we do this wisely? Well, maybe the answer isn't endorsing specific candidates, but preaching God's principles clearly and courageously in the context of policy, so God's people can better discern which policies and leaders align with his heart. After all, to vote means to make a decision. Policy is simply how we live that decision out in public. So when pastors teach God's truth on policy issues, they're not being political, they're being faithful, because policy shapes lives, and lives are what God cares about. We say we're not ashamed of the gospel, so why are we afraid to talk about how it shapes our lives, our values, our convictions, even our public voice, our politics? So maybe we shouldn't ask, should pastors endorse political candidates? And instead ask, are we willing to speak God's truth even when it's politically uncomfortable? Let me ask you, is God using the current administration to reopen an opportunity for the church to regain its saltiness, to step back into culture with boldness, clarity, and grace? And seriously, I wonder if the Father reads the Declaration of Independence and asks, now, what will you do with this freedom? I'm Brian Tuttermore with today's Faith Check News. Remember, think right to live free.